Hello, amazing, stunning, attractive people. My name is Rick Senet Katian, and I welcome you to my very first vlog. On this vlog, we're going to talk about the history of science and the major discovery of science. The history of science is not only a story of humanity's collective movements from ignorance to knowledge. We all know science is as old as the world itself. There's no individual that can exactly identify when and where the science began. From the genesis of time, science has already been existent and it is always interwoven in the society. So how can science be defined? First, science as an idea. It includes ideas and theories and all available scientific explanation and observation about the natural and physical world. Second, science as an intellectual activity. It encompasses a systematic and practical study of the natural and physical world. This process of study involves scientific observation and experimentation. Third, science as a body of knowledge. It is a subject or discipline, a field of study, or a body of knowledge that deals with process and learning about the natural and physical world. This is what we refer to as a school of science. Fourth, science of personal and social activity. This explains that science is both knowledge and activity done by human beings to develop better understanding of the world around them. It is a means to improve life and to survive in life. It is interwoven with the people's lives. Today, science can be both our body of knowledge about the world as well as the method we use to create that knowledge or how we know that stuff that we know. Within that, there are two main practices, things we do systematic to generate knowledge. One, observe a specific aspect of the world. For example, Darwin spent decades observing the sudden variations of different kinds of barnacles, orchid, turtles, birds, and every other living things. This let us discover how these change over time. Human beings use scientific activities from the very beginning of their lives in order to survive and understand everything around them. They always observe and study the very specific aspect of the world in order to answer the wonder of the minds of humanities. They have created noble thoughts, they being called philosophers, to give possible answers and with explanation to a certain phenomenon. Also, humans have religion to justify the origin of life and all living things. The thought of scientific revolution is claimed in 16th century, continued to spread to the late 18th century that taught in Europe. Why in Europe? The possible answer is that at the time Europe invented the first ever printing machine, and Europe amazingly increased the scholar in various fields of human interest and have a lot of intellectual activities have done in the field of learnings. Meanwhile, science are foreign thoughts that been spreading around the world. Anybody that can examine the story of science, technology, medicine, and mathematics is aware that the great effect of the civilization of the Asian world that had their own sophisticated tradition and activities. It takes many processes of events that made a mark in the emergence of the modern science. During the early period, when developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry changed the view of the society about the nature. The idea had been created in the period enabled the human to reflect, rethink, and re-examine what their beliefs and the way of life. There is no doubt that humans expanded their interests and make them think twice on how they do science and view scientific processes. And now let's talk about the three scientists who have a major discovery in the field of science. The first scientist is Nicolaus Copernicus. He was born on February 19, 1473 in Marian, Poland. One of the Renaissance men, particularly in the field of science, Copernicus resembled the Greek ancient philosophers or thinkers. He did not do anything extensive, such as observing heavenly body or inviting people to test his ideas. His ideas were examples of what is presently called as the experiment. Copernicus' idea and model of the universe was initially complete in 1510. Not long after that, he circulated a summary of his ideas to his few close friends in a manuscript called Commentariolus. There was no proof that Copernicus was concerned about the risk of persecution by the church if he published his ideas formally. Copernicus was best known of his contemporaries as a doctor and the canon of Frauenburg Cathedral. Copernican theory was not widely accepted until the late 17th century, over 100 years after the death of Copernicus. The second scientist is Charles Darwin. He was born on February 12, 1809. Charles Darwin was an English naturalist and a geologist, best known for his contribution to evolutionary theory. He was the author of the law of natural selection of theory of evolution. He inspired the psychological school of thought, functionalism. The third scientist is Freud Simon. Freud is a famous figure in the field of psychology. Also describe him as the towering literacy figure and a very talented communicator who did his share to raise the consciousness of the civilization world in psychology matters. His method of psychoanalysis was proven to be effective in understanding some neurological conditions that were not understood by medicine at that time. His method was unorthodox, focusing on human sexuality and the evil nature of man. This was a main challenge the scholars and ordinary citizens of his time. To some, they found his ideas not easily, especially in his explanation of human sexuality. Freud was born in a much later period from the scientific revolution, but his contribution to knowledge can be seen in many aspects of human science. Freud was born in a much later period from the scientific revolution, but his contribution to knowledge can be seen in many aspects of human science, including art, literature, philosophy, politics, and psychotherapy. The facts remain that Freud's ideas and theories are still considered nowadays as a great inspiration to examine human minds and behavior in a more scientifically accepted way. And last, we're going to talk about the major discoveries in the field of science. First is the Copernican heliocentrism, proposed by Nicolaus Copernicus. Nicolaus Copernicus discovered that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and he discovered that the Sun is the center of the universe and planets orbiting around it. Second is the theory of evolution by natural selection, first formulated in Darwin's book on the origin of species in 1859, is the process of which by organisms change over time as a result of changes in heritable physical or behavioral traits. And last is discovered by Sigmund Freud that the human personality is constructed into three parts, which is the ID or internal desire, ego, and superego. That's the major discoveries in the field of science. So that's the end of my blog, and I hope you have learned something about the history of science and the major discoveries in the field of science.